people killed in an elevator collapse in Kandy. Number of COVID-19 patients in the Minuwangoda cluster reaches 1,789. Shops and pharmacies remain open until 10 p.m. in areas under curfew. Yoshida Rajapaksa appointed as Prime Minister's Chief of Staff. Hello there and welcome to today's edition of Lunchtime News here on TV1. You're joining me, Debbie Paldano. Now on to headline-making stories this afternoon. The number of COVID-19 patients in the Minuwangoda cluster has risen to 1,789. This was after 68 patients were detected yesterday. The Health Ministry said that 1,851 COVID-19 patients are currently receiving treatment in the country. Accordingly, Sri Lanka's COVID-19 tally now stands at 5,244. 68 individuals tested positive for COVID-19 as part of the Minuwangoda cluster yesterday. 22 were employees at the garment factory in which the cluster was formed or their associates. They had been undergoing quarantine. According to the Department of Government Information, the 46 other patients were identified as their associates. Meanwhile, 12 individuals returned to the country from Australia today. According to the National Operations Centre for the Prevention of COVID-19 Outbreak, all individuals have been directed to quarantine centres that have been managed by the Tri-Forces. 53,011 individuals have completed the quarantine process and returned to their homes so far. Meanwhile, 365,859 individuals had undergone PCR tests in the country by yesterday. Meanwhile, Army Commander Lieutenant General Shavendra Silva has said that investigations are underway to find the origin of the Minuwangoda COVID-19 cluster under two grounds.
Yesterday, 68 people were identified with COVID-19 from the Minuwangoda cluster. The majority of the 68 patients were from the Minuwangoda, Gampaha, Kandana and Katunayaka areas. This justifies the reason to impose quarantine curfew in these areas. We also detected some patients from several areas including Colombo. Some are assuming that we will impose the quarantine curfew because of these patients. However, it is impossible to do that. The government led by the President and the Prime Minister meets with the task force every day to analyze the situation. A curfew is imposed only if it is required. There are various allegations that the army and our PHIs take people to quarantine centers even at night. We will remove people who are infected with COVID-19 from the community and take them to a quarantine center as soon as the cases are reported. We are doing this to ensure the safety of the other people in the community. We are carrying out these measures to protect the people from the pandemic. We are conducting investigations to identify the origin of the cluster at the Minuwangoda factory. This matter is still under investigation. We are investigating further into two possible aspects. We are certain that we will be able to uncover information about this very soon.
The Gazette notification outlining COVID-19 health regulations in the country was published yesterday. According to the Gazette notification, every person in a public place or location in which one may come into contact with another person shall wear a face mask at all times. The Gazette has ordered that a distance of not less than 1 meter must be maintained between two people. Entering or leaving areas from which COVID-19 patients have been identified, visiting public places and travelling within these areas have also been prohibited. Further, all individuals entering any institution or workplace are required to wear a face mask at all times and undergo temperature checks before entering the premises. The Gazette has also instructed to provide adequate hand washing facilities with soap or sanitizer for individuals entering these premises. It adds that the name, national identity card number and contact details of every person entering any institution or workplace must also be recorded at all times. According to the Gazette, the number of employees at a workplace must not exceed the maximum number of people permitted within the premises at a time as stipulated by the proper authority.
The government is not imposing these regulations because it likes to do it. Although this situation arose in March, the Gazette was delayed until now since it is of utmost requirement. The general public does not have to panic about this. A person who follows these regulations does not have to become upset about this matter. This Gazette has been published to take action against individuals who breach health regulations and expose the lives of the people in the country at risk by also posing a threat to national security. I believe this is not an issue for those who fulfill their duties.
මම හිතන්නේ යුතුයකම ඉෂ්ට සිද්ධ කරනවා නම් මේ ප්‍රශ්නයක් නැහැ.
Shops and pharmacies in areas that are under quarantine curfew were kept open until 8 a.m. today.
Authorities have permitted shops and pharmacies in areas that are under quarantine curfew to remain open for 14 hours. Accordingly, these stores will remain open until 10 p.m.
අවසර ලබා දී තිබෙනවා අද දින උදෑසන 8 සිට රාත්‍රී.
We have permitted shops and pharmacies to be kept open for a period of 14 hours from 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. However, we are requesting the public to abide by the health guidelines during this period. Shops will not be allowed to remain open during the weekends in areas that are under curfew.
ඇදින් නීතිය පවතින ප්‍රදේශවල
Our cameras captured the manner in which the public in the Gampaha district engaged in their day-to-day activities in line with the health guidelines. However, long queues were witnessed outside certain stores as residents complained about a shortage of goods in the market. This was the situation in the Mirigama town today. People were seen abiding by health directives in the area.
Now in one of your headline-making stories, Mahinda Rajapaksa's second son Yoshida Rajapaksa has been appointed as the Chief of Staff to the Prime Minister. The appointment was made by Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa. Yoshida Rajapaksa is currently an officer in the Sri Lanka Navy. The appeal court has ordered that the writ petition filed by Minister Rishad Bathiuddin seeking the prevention of his arrest will be taken up for consideration on the 20th of this month. This was when the petition was taken up before Justices Mahinda Samaradira and Ajit Obesekara today.
The appeal court ordered the petitioners to issue notices on the respondents to the petition after none of them had turned up in court today. 7 people, including the Acting Inspector General of Police, the Director and the Deputy Inspector General of Police in charge of the Criminal Investigation Department, have been named as respondents to the petition. Meanwhile, Reverend Father Lawrence Ramanayaka filed an intervening petition at the appeal court today on behalf of His Eminence Malcolm Cardinal Ranjit to refrain from issuing an order against the arrest of Riyaj Badedin as sought by the petitioner. The petitioner had also sought a court order stating that the release of Riyaj Badedin, who was arrested over last year's April 21st attacks by the CID without producing him in court, is unlawful. Reverend Father Lawrence Ramanayaka also requested the court to issue an order directing the respondents to the petition, including the acting police chief, to recommence an investigation into the petitioner.
The Department of Meteorology has said that wind speeds can range between 60 and 70 km per hour in the deep and shallow sea areas extending from Hambantota to Pothuwil and from Puttalam to Kankasanture via Mana.
Issuing an advisory, the department noted that these sea areas can be rough or very rough at times and warned that it will be dangerous to engage in fishing in these areas until tomorrow morning. According to the advisory, wind speed in the sea areas extending from Kankasanture to Trincomalee via Mullaitivu may range between 50 and 60 km per hour. The Met Department said that gusty winds between 50 and 55 km per hour can be expected in the other sea areas around the island and will be fairly rough at times.
Former Provincial Councillor Namal Kanaratne convened a media briefing in Kurunegala today.
The 20th Amendment has been opposed by several factions within the government. The chief incumbent priest of the Ramanya and Amarapura sects have expressed objection towards this matter. The bishops have also begun to oppose this amendment. Rifts are developing within the government as well. This might be some sort of theatric staged by the government. However, the 20th Amendment that the government is trying to bring forward will severely impede democracy in the country. It will also pave the way for an autocratic administration. We wish to urge the government to avoid bringing forward the 20th Amendment that will pave the way for dictatorship instead of introducing a new constitution in the country.
Now in some tragic news, 2 people were killed after an elevator collapsed in the Leavalla area in Kandy today. Police said the elevator had collapsed after a cable had snapped while transporting building materials. One individual had died at the location of the incident, while the other had died after being admitted to the Kandy National Hospital. The deceased has been identified as a 35-year-old individual. Further investigations are being carried out into the incident. Residents of Valapane have complained that they have been hit by a shortage of water in the area.
These residents in Valapane make their way up the mountain in a bid to quench their thirst. Villagers say they will be left without water if they do not make the journey that forces them to trek several kilometers. The residents of the Serupitiya, Mailigaswata, Ihalapannala and Kirthibandarapula villages in the Valapane Divisional Secretariat have been hit by the shortage of water for a very long time.
It will take us about 45 minutes to fetch water. We have had enough of expressing our woes. Nowadays we cannot climb the mountain as it is too risky for us. That is why we are forced to fetch water using a bucket and trek for long distances.
Around 80 families in this village have been hit by this problem. Residents lament that they are forced to walk several kilometers to reach a pond from which they obtain water.
Even an expectant mother has to fetch water in this manner by walking several kilometers with buckets of water. We are forced to obtain water from this body of water that is mixed with excretory matters of monkeys. Cows drink water from this well as well. We are suffering badly.
For a very long time, residents have been pleading authorities to address this issue. However, their pleas have fallen to deaf ears. Residents say they cannot bear the brunt of this suffering anymore.
A dengue eradication program was held in the Valimada area today in line with the Dengue Control Week.
The dengue eradication program was implemented by the officers of the Valimada Medical Office and the Bogahakumburu Police. Inspections were carried out looking for dengue mosquito breeding places in the Guruthalava area in Valimada. The Valimada Medical Officers warned the residents of the houses where such breeding places were found and stated that legal action would be taken against such neglections.
Today marks World Food Day. The United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization and the United Nations World Food Programme joined hands in calling for action to improve the food systems to help people better understand shocks, including the COVID-19 pandemic, and prevent increasing malnutrition in the country.
Issuing a joint statement, the FAO and WFP said, the recent spike of COVID-19 cases has highlighted the importance of strengthening our food systems to ensure that safe, good quality and nutritious food makes its way from the farm to the table, even amid disruptions as unprecedented as the current COVID-19 crisis. It adds that the socio-economic effects of the pandemic, particularly loss of jobs and reduced incomes, are heightening existing threats. They say that in Sri Lanka, an increase in the rates of malnutrition is a real risk. This year's World Food Day theme is Growth, Nourish, Sustain, Together. The FAO and WFP are calling for sustainable investment in food systems to achieve healthy diets for all. They add that without a massive improvement in the food supply chain, countries like Sri Lanka are set to become increasingly vulnerable to financial volatility and climate shocks.
The COVID-19 pandemic has exposed the fragility in agri-food supply chains. It is natural for food supply chains to have disruptions at the onset of a crisis. However, what is important is that these supply chains need to be robust and resilient to recover fast and operate smoothly to ensure food travels from farm to the table uninterrupted. What is required is smart, systemic action to get the food to those who need it in order to prevent crops from rotting in the field because of lack of efficient food supply chains.
In your sports news, the Women's Committee of Sri Lanka's National Olympic Committee has set up a special team to investigate reports of harassment in sports.
The Women's Committee of the National Olympic Committee has launched a campaign titled "Harassment is No Game" to eradicate harassment in the sports arena in the country. In a statement, the committee said the campaign organizers hope to address all forms of harassment, including mental, physical, verbal and sexual abuse and bullying in the sports community. Nilu Jayatilaka, the chairperson of the Women's Committee, said the first phase of the campaign will focus on educating the relevant entities on the subject. She added that a system that would allow whistleblowers to communicate with a designated unit would be established as the second phase of the campaign. According to the committee, a special team has been set up to investigate reports of harassment and to pursue appropriate action immediately. The committee said that harassment can take place in the form of bodily harm, inappropriate language, touch and comments and also unsolicited sexual expressions.
Well, that is a wrap of lunchtime news here on TV1. For more news, log on to our award-winning website, that is www.newsfirst.lk. For the Newsfirst team, I'm David Paldano. Take care.